The night was dark and quiet, but inside the small, grim brothel at the edge of town, chaos reigned. The air was thick with smoke, the scent of cheap perfume, and the nervous whispers of women who had seen too much in their lives. In a tiny, dimly lit back room, a young woman named Alara lay on a tattered mattress. Her body trembled from exhaustion, her face pale and damp with sweat, and her eyes were wide with both pain and fear. She had given birth just hours ago. The baby's cries had filled the room, a small, fragile sound that made her heart swell, with love and worry all at once. But the joy she felt was short-lived. In this place, happiness was never meant to last. She barely had time to cradle her newborn before the harsh reality of her life intervened. The madam, a tall, sharp-eyed woman named Greta, entered the room with her usual stern expression. Her boots clicked loudly against the worn wooden floor. "Time's up," she said flatly, ignoring Alara's weak protests. "The child belongs to the house now. You know the rules." Alara's heart sank. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I just gave birth. I need her. My baby." Greta's eyes were cold. "Rules don't change for a woman's feelings. You were warned. You belong here. The child does not." Tears streamed down Alara's face as she clutched the baby closer to her chest. The infant's tiny fingers curled around hers, as if sensing the danger. She wanted to fight, to scream, to run, but the room was small, the madam's gaze unyielding, and the other women, many of them mothers themselves, watched silently, too afraid to intervene. With a swift motion, Greta took the baby from Alara's arms. The infant wailed loudly, the sound echoing through the narrow halls. Alara tried to reach for her child, but Greta's grip was iron strong. "You'll see her again," Greta said mockingly, "when the house decides it's time, not before." Alara sank to the mattress, her hands clutching empty air. The cries of her baby still echoed in her mind. Every instinct screamed at her to run after the child, but she knew the brothel's rules were merciless. Any attempt to escape would mean punishment, perhaps even death. Her chest heaved as she tried to breathe, each gasp a mixture of sorrow and rage. As the night wore on, Alara could hear the baby's cries from somewhere in the brothel. The sound was both a comfort and a torture, a reminder that her child was alive but out of her reach. She whispered soft lullabies, even though the baby could not hear her, hoping somehow her words would reach the tiny ears she longed to protect. Outside, a shadow moved quietly. A man, tall and quiet, had been watching the brothel for days. He had heard rumors of a baby, a fragile child taken from a young mother in despair. Something about the story drew him in. He had lost someone, too, a woman he had loved more than life itself. The grief still weighed heavily on his heart, and the thought of an innocent child in danger stirred emotions he had long buried. Inside, Greta placed the baby in a small cradle behind the bar, her back turned to Alara. The madam's assistants whispered among themselves, glancing at the child with curiosity and greed. Some saw a chance for profit, others simply wanted to survive in a harsh place where power and fear ruled. Alara, meanwhile, sat on the floor, her hands trembling, trying to memorize every detail of the room, every corner, every shadow. She needed a plan. She needed hope, though it seemed like a fragile thread in the oppressive darkness of the brothel. Hours passed. The cries subsided only briefly when the baby slept, but they returned quickly, relentless and piercing. Each time she heard them, Alara's heart clenched with longing. She imagined holding the baby again, rocking her gently, whispering promises of safety and love. Every sound, every breath reminded her of what she had lost and what she had to endure. The other women in the brothel avoided her gaze. Some pitied her silently, remembering their own losses, their own stolen dreams. Others feared attracting Greta's wrath by showing sympathy. In this place, kindness was a dangerous luxury, and every day was a battle to survive. Meanwhile, the shadow outside shifted closer. The man, whose grief had left him hollow, but whose heart still longed for connection, knew he could not simply watch from the shadows. Something deep inside him demanded action. He did not know the baby's story in detail, nor did he know Ilara personally, but he understood loss. He understood the ache of emptiness and the desperate need to hold someone who was helpless and pure. Inside the brothel, Greta finally left, satisfied that she had enforced her authority. The baby, still tiny and fragile, was left alone in the cradle. Ilara seized the moment. She crawled to the door, peeking into the hall. Guards were distracted. Greta had underestimated the depth of a mother's love and a soul desperate to protect what was precious. Ilara's mind raced. She did not have a plan yet, but she knew she could not wait. The baby needed her. Every instinct screamed at her to act. Every heartbeat echoed the cries of her child. And somewhere outside, the grieving man watched, ready to intervene, ready to change the course of fate for both mother and child. Time felt endless. The night seemed to stretch forever, every sound magnified in Ilara's ears. She whispered prayers, pleaded with the universe, begging for a miracle. And though hope felt fragile, a small spark flickered in the darkness, promising that this story was far from over. The town lay quiet under a silver moon, the streets empty except for a few stray cats and the distant creak of old wooden signs. At the edge of town, in a small, humble cottage, sat Darian, a man whose eyes carried the weight of sorrow no words could capture. He had once had a family, a wife whose laughter had lit up his world, a presence so warm that even the coldest days felt gentle. But fate had been cruel. She was gone, taken too soon by illness, and left him with an emptiness so vast it seemed impossible to fill. Darian had wandered for days, restless and searching for a purpose, feeling as though the world had little to offer him anymore. The town itself seemed indifferent to his grief, its people wrapped in their own lives, blind to the hollowness that consumed him. Yet, something deep within whispered that his life was not finished. That whisper became louder when he heard rumors. At the tavern, whispers of a newborn child, taken from a desperate mother, trapped in a place no one dared enter. The widower's heart stirred. The news struck a chord he had not expected. Though he had no children, no hope left for a family of his own, something primal and protective awakened inside him. He could not explain it, but the thought of a small, helpless baby suffering filled him with both anger and longing. He had lost someone he loved, and in that loss, he now found a chance to protect a life that could not defend itself. Determined, Darian made his way to the brothel under the cover of night. The building loomed ominously, its windows glowing faintly, casting eerie shadows across the empty streets. He moved silently, watching every movement, listening to the muffled sounds that reached him from within, the cries of the baby, the laughter and harsh words of the madam, and the quiet whispers of women who dared not speak too loudly. Inside, Ilara sat on the floor, her arms empty, but her heart full of pain. She had been watching, listening, waiting for a moment of weakness in Greta's control. She did not know who or what might come to her aid, but she felt a strange shift in the air, a sense that fate was stirring in her favor. And indeed, Darian had arrived. He observed the brothel from a distance, careful, calculating. He knew he could not simply walk in and demand the child. He needed a plan. Every step he took, every movement, had to be precise. The madam was cunning and ruthless, and the women who worked for her were loyal, not to the law, but to survival. Darian understood that he was not only fighting for the baby, but also against a system that thrived on fear and control. Hours passed. He watched as Greta moved through the halls, inspecting rooms, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Each time she approached the back room where the baby slept, Darian held his breath, afraid that any wrong move might provoke her wrath. Yet he also noticed the small cracks in her armor, moments when she hesitated, distracted by greed or by the minor chaos of the brothel. These small windows of opportunity became his focus. Meanwhile, Ilara continued to whisper to the empty room, speaking to the baby as though her words could bridge the cruel gap that separated them. She imagined the child in the widower's hands, safe and protected, and a flicker of hope warmed her aching heart. She did not know who would rescue the child, but a deep intuition told her that someone kind-hearted had come to change their fate. Darian finally found his moment. Greta had moved away from the cradle, distracted by a visitor at the front of the brothel. He slipped inside, careful to remain hidden in the shadows. The baby lay quietly, small and fragile, wrapped in a thin blanket. Darian's chest tightened. The child was so tiny, so vulnerable, and yet alive. His hands shook as he reached out, his fingers hovering above the soft form, not wanting to harm the little one even by accident. Then, a sudden noise, the creak of the floorboards, alerted Greta. Her sharp voice cut through the room. "Who's there?" she demanded, stepping closer with the menacing presence she always carried. Darian's heart pounded, but he did not retreat. He stepped into the faint light, raising his hands in a gesture of calm. "I mean no harm," he said firmly. "I only want the child. I can pay double the usual price if you allow it." Greta narrowed her eyes, suspicious and calculating. "Double the price?" she repeated. "Why should I trust you? You could be anyone." "I am a man who knows loss," Darian said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I have loved and lost more than I can bear. I see this child in danger, and I cannot ignore it. She needs safety. I can give her that. Please." Greta studied him, her mind weighing greed against caution. Darian's offer was tempting, but she was not easily fooled. She circled him, her eyes sharp, her presence intimidating. "You think money will buy what you want?" she asked. "Do you even understand what it means to take a child from this house? You could lose more than you gain." Darian did not flinch. "I am ready to risk everything for her," he said. "I will not be turned away, not for my loss, not for hers." The tension in the room was thick. The other women watched silently, the air charged with fear and anticipation. Each second stretched into eternity. Then, in a moment of rare vulnerability, Greta hesitated. The greed in her eyes battled with the faintest flicker of conscience. Darian could see it, could feel it. This was his chance. He moved closer, his gaze locked on the cradle. The baby stirred, her tiny fingers curling, her soft cry breaking the silence. Darian's heart ached. Every loss he had suffered, every empty night he had endured, seemed to converge in this small room, in this fragile life. He whispered softly, "I will keep you safe. I promise." Greta finally spoke, her voice sharp but tinged with calculation. "Double the price and you can have her. But be warned, you will be watched. Any misstep, and the child returns to me." Darian nodded, relief flooding through him. "Agreed," he said, his hands gently lifting the baby. Her weight was light, fragile, but her small fingers clutched at his coat as if sensing his promise. He held her close, feeling the warmth of her tiny body, the soft rhythm of her heartbeat. For the first time in many nights, he felt hope. Ilara, hidden in the shadows, watched the scene unfold. Tears filled her eyes as she realized the child. she had fought so hard to protect was now in capable, loving hands. Though she could not yet claim her baby, she knew that the widower's heart was true, that this act of courage and compassion had given her child a chance at life. The night continued, but a change had occurred. Darian and the baby shared a connection that transcended words, a bond forged in grief, love, and the desperate need to protect what was pure. Outside, the town slept, unaware that within the brothel a small miracle had begun. A fragile thread of hope had been woven into the lives of a grieving widower, a helpless baby, and a mother yearning for justice. And as the first light of dawn touched the edges of the town, Darian held the child close, knowing that their story had only just begun, that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but also with the promise of love, safety, and the chance for a new beginning. The sun rose slowly over the town, spilling golden light across dusty streets and weathered buildings. Darian walked carefully, clutching the tiny bundle of warmth in his arms. The baby's small head rested against his chest, and each breath she took reminded him of the fragile miracle he now carried. His heart ached with love and responsibility. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in months, hope stirred within him. Every step toward safety was weighed with caution. The brothel's shadow loomed in his mind, a reminder that Greta's watchful eyes were not easily fooled. He could not afford a mistake, not when the child's life depended on his vigilance. Each street seemed longer, each corner more threatening. The town, usually familiar and tame, now appeared full of silent dangers. Darian had arranged a small cottage on the outskirts of town, a place where no one would think to search for a baby. The interior was modest but clean, with a soft blanket laid on a wicker cradle. As he entered, the baby stirred, tiny fingers curling instinctively. He whispered soothingly, "You're safe now. I promise no one will harm you." The sound of his voice seemed to calm her, and she settled against him with a soft sigh, but safety was only temporary. Darian knew that Greta would not allow the child to leave without watching every step of the transaction. She had rules, and she expected obedience. Money had changed hands, but she had made it clear that she would keep tabs on the child's every move. Every visitor, every unexpected sound outside the cottage could become a threat. Darian's relief was tempered by constant vigilance. Ilara had stayed behind, hidden in the shadows of the town, watching the cottage from a distance. Her heart ached to be close to her child, yet she understood that the widower's protection was what the baby needed most. She moved carefully, ensuring no one would spot her, and planned how she might one day reunite with her little girl without jeopardizing the safety Darian provided. Meanwhile, Darian took deliberate steps to create a life for the baby. He fetched clean water from the well, prepared warm milk, and carefully folded the small blanket around her. Every action was deliberate, infused with a protective tenderness that surprised even him. He had lived alone for so long, lost in grief, yet now he felt a fierce need to provide, to shield, to nurture. But trouble was never far. The town had eyes and ears everywhere. Rumors of a man claiming a baby from the brothel had begun to circulate, whispered in taverns and marketplaces. Some thought he was mad, others admired his bravery, and a few saw opportunity. Darian had to navigate a web of suspicion and curiosity while maintaining the child's safety. Every knock at the door made him tense. Every stranger in the street made his senses sharpen. Greta, true to her word, had not let go completely. She sent a messenger to the cottage, a woman who appeared friendly but whose eyes were calculating and cold. "We just want to see how the child is," she said, her tone sugary but insincere. Darian sensed the danger immediately. He met her gaze with steady eyes, refusing to hand over the baby. "She is well," he said firmly, keeping the infant close. and she will remain safe. The woman hesitated, realizing that Darian's determination was stronger than she had expected. She returned to Greta with a report that hinted at the widower's resolve, and Greta's mind whirred with plans. She could not openly challenge him now, not without risking her reputation, but she would find a way to reclaim what she considered hers. Days turned into weeks. Darian and the baby established a fragile routine. He sang softly to her in the mornings, cradled her through sleepless nights, and spoke aloud as though he were teaching her the world, even though she could not yet understand. And as he did, he felt the weight of grief lighten ever so slightly. The act of caring, of giving love without expectation, began to heal the deep wounds left by loss. Yet the world outside remained dangerous. Bandits roamed nearby, seeking opportunity, and whispers of a wealthy man claiming a baby reached ears that would not honor kindness. Darian fortified the cottage as best he could, but he knew it was only a matter of time before the shadows of greed and cruelty would come knocking. Ilara, torn between fear and longing, devised her own plan. She would wait, observe, and act when the moment was right. Her love for the baby burned brightly, but she also trusted Darian's promise. And though she stayed hidden, she felt a connection, a silent bond with the man who had risked everything for her child. One night, as a storm raged outside, Darian awoke to the sound of movement at the window. Shadows danced across the walls as rain pelted the roof. He held the baby tightly, his heart hammering. Footsteps approached the door, deliberate and slow. His mind raced, calculating his options, knowing that any confrontation could be deadly. A voice called out, low and cautious. "It's only me," said a figure stepping into the dim light. It was Ilara. Relief flooded through Darian, but caution remained. He led her inside, speaking in hushed tones. "She is safe," he said, "but we cannot let anyone see you, not yet." Together, they watched the baby sleep, her small chest rising and falling with a gentle rhythm. The storm outside seemed distant now, insignificant compared to the fragile life before them. In that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. Their cooperation was the key to survival, their bond forged in shared love and determination. But danger would not be denied for long. Greta had not forgotten, and her cunning mind was already plotting. She would test Darian, tempt him, and push him to his limits. Every coin paid, every promise made, came with a price, and soon the widower would learn that love and hope, while powerful, were never free. Darian and Ilara prepared for what lay ahead. They reinforced the cottage, planned escape routes, and watched for signs of trouble. And through it all, the baby remained unaware of the peril around her, cradled in arms that promised safety and warmth. As the storm subsided and dawn broke, painting the world in soft light, Darian felt a surge of determination. The road ahead would be dangerous, but he had made a choice: to protect, to fight, to love. And in that choice, he found the first true glimmer of hope since his wife's death. Little did he know, the next challenge would test every ounce of courage, every measure of resolve. Greta's shadow loomed larger than ever, and the price of hope was only beginning to be revealed. The morning sun barely pierced through the thick clouds, casting a gray hue over the town. Darian stood at the edge of the small cottage's porch, holding the baby close. The air felt heavy, almost as if the world itself was warning him of what was to come. His mind raced with strategies, with escape routes, with every possible way to protect the child from Greta and the dangers that lurked in shadows. Every second of hesitation could cost a life, and he felt the weight of that truth. Pressing down on his chest, Ilara appeared at his side, moving quietly like a ghost. Her eyes, full of both fear and determination, met his. "We can't wait any longer," she said softly. "She will come for the child, and if we hesitate, it could be too late." Darian nodded, tightening his grip around the infant. "I know, but we must be ready. Every step must be planned. One mistake, one misstep, and she could take her." The town was eerily quiet. The streets seemed empty, yet Darian knew better. Greta's reach was long, her influence wide. She had allies, men who would follow her orders without question, and the thought of those men searching for the baby made his stomach churn. He could not let the child fall into their hands. Not now, not ever. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence. A horse's hooves striking the dirt road, steady and deliberate. Darian's heart skipped a beat. He peered through the window, spotting a figure, riding quickly toward the cottage. His pulse quickened as he recognized the rider. Greta. She had come herself, not sending a messenger this time. Her eyes were cold, her lips curved in a cruel smile. "Hand her over," she called, her voice carrying through the morning air. Darian stepped forward, holding the baby protectively. "She is not yours," he shouted back. "You have no claim here." Greta laughed, a sound that sent chills down his spine. "Everything has a price, Darian. You paid double for her, but you cannot outsmart me forever. Hand the child over, or there will be consequences you cannot imagine." The tension was palpable. Alara moved closer, placing a hand on Darian's arm. "We can't fight her head-on," she whispered. "We need a plan." But Darian shook his head. "There is no more time. It's now or never." He tightened his hold around the baby, his mind focused on one thing: survival. The next moments unfolded in a blur. Darian moved with speed and precision, slipping through the back door of the cottage. Alara followed, carrying a small bag with supplies. They ran toward the dense forest behind the cottage, the baby safe in Darian's arms. The sound of pursuit was immediate. Greta's men shouted orders, their horses pounding the earth, but Darian's knowledge of the terrain gave him an advantage. Branches whipped against their faces, roots threatened to trip them, but he pushed forward with determination, fueled by love and desperation. The baby cooed softly, unaware of the chaos surrounding her. Her small hands grasped at Darian's shirt, and he whispered soothing words to keep her calm. "It's all right, little one. Daddy's here. We'll be safe soon." The forest was thick, but it offered hiding places. Darian led them to a small cave he had discovered weeks before, a place few would dare to enter. They slipped inside, hearts pounding, ears straining for any sign of pursuit. For a moment they were safe, hidden from sight. The baby slept, her chest rising and falling gently, and Darian allowed himself a brief sigh of relief. But the danger was far from over. Greta was cunning, relentless, and patient. She would not give up so easily. Darian and Alara knew that they had only bought themselves time, and every minute counted. They needed a permanent solution, a way to ensure the child's safety beyond hiding. They spent the next hours planning, weighing every possibility. Moving to another town risked exposure. Leaving the forest meant facing Greta and her men. The solution had to be clever, daring, and absolute. Alara suggested seeking help from an old friend, a man who owed her family a debt long ago. Darian agreed, knowing that they could not survive alone. Night fell, bringing darkness and uncertainty. They prepared to move under the cover of shadows, carrying only what was necessary. The baby stirred, sensing the tension, and Darian whispered words of comfort. "We'll be safe, I promise. We'll make it through this." Alara nodded, her hand brushing against his, a silent affirmation of trust and unity. As they left the cave, Greta's figure appeared at the edge of the forest, illuminated by the moonlight. Her eyes blazed with fury and obsession. "You cannot run forever," she screamed. "She is mine!" Darian stopped, facing her with unyielding resolve. "You will not harm her," he said firmly. "Not now, not ever." The confrontation was inevitable. Greta advanced, her men flanking her, but Darian was ready. He had anticipated their movements, the terrain, every advantage he could use. Using the cover of trees and shadows, he led Greta and her men into a trap of his own making. Loose branches, hidden pits, and clever maneuvers slowed them down, buying precious time. Alara stayed close, guiding Darian silently, helping to navigate the obstacles. The baby remained safe, cradled securely in Darian's arms. Every step, every decision was a gamble, but one worth taking. They could not afford failure, not when so much depended on their courage and determination. Hours passed in a tense, dangerous game of cat and mouse. The forest seemed endless, each turn a potential risk. But Darian's knowledge and Alara's guidance allowed them to stay ahead. Finally, they reached a small, abandoned cabin deep in the woods, a place unknown even to Greta. It was isolated, fortified by natural barriers, and most importantly, hidden from view. Inside, they settled cautiously. Darian laid the baby gently in a makeshift crib, ensuring she was comfortable and secure. Alara helped, her hands steady despite the fear that still lingered. For the first time in days, they allowed themselves a moment of relief, though the weight of danger still pressed upon them. But the fight was not over. Greta would not abandon her obsession so easily. She would search, scheme, and strike when least expected. Darian and Alara knew that their safety depended not just on hiding, but on confronting the challenge directly, on being willing to sacrifice everything to protect the child. As the night deepened, Darian made a silent vow. He would face Greta, endure whatever came, and ensure the baby's future. He had lost so much, but this little life represented a chance to protect, to love, and to reclaim a sense of purpose. And if that required ultimate sacrifice, he was ready. The dawn brought, new light casting a golden glow over the forest. In that quiet morning, Darian, Alara, and the baby stood together, bound by courage, hope, and unbreakable resolve. The journey was far from over, but they had faced the worst and survived. And in that survival, they found not just safety, but the promise of a future where love could triumph over greed and cruelty. Greta's shadow still loomed, but Darian had learned a truth deeper than fear. Love demanded courage, and courage required sacrifice. And as long as he drew breath, he would protect the child, no matter the cost. The forest held its secrets, the baby slept peacefully, and Darian's heart, once heavy with grief, now carried the light of hope, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.